Good afternoon, morning, day, time, whatever time you're accessing these videos. I hope you're having a great day. So this week we are talking about climate change. And with that, there's so many things, honestly, there's so many things that we could go into that could take up hours and hours and hours worth of videos. Depending on what college you decide to transfer to, you may actually be able to take an entire class on climate change. There's one offered at San Francisco State that several of my colleagues teach. But we have to kind of start at the basics. We've got to start looking at some data. Here, we're looking at a graph of global mean estimates of land and ocean data, so land temperatures as well as ocean temperatures, from 1880 up to present, and I got this data from the NASA website. So we're looking here at our annual mean, so you can kind of see how it does fluctuate quite a bit, but we did some smoothing on it, and this red line here shows kind of the baseline. But what we're looking at is not just temperature in total of itself. We're looking at temperature anomaly. So an anomaly means that it's the separation from an average, like a set average, basically. So if the anomaly is negative, then we are below average. If the anomaly is positive, then we are above average. And usually it's a 30-year average that we do these comparisons to. What we can see in this graph in particular is a very, very clear increase in temperatures as we have progressed through time. And before, and this has been since industrialization, right? So we were below average for the late 1800s and into the 1900s, but then it looks like pretty much around 1950 is when we started to see a very steady global increase in temperature, again, not just on land, but also in the oceans. At this same website, which I recommend poking around if you'd like, because you can make your own maps, we can look at global anomalies by decade. So I made this map looking at March global temperatures from 2000 to 2010. And what I like about this map in particular is it's color-coded. So the warmer the colors indicate warmer patterns, cooler colors indicate cooler patterns or cooler anomalies. What we can see here is a whole lot of red, right? That really is at least popping out to me. We do have some regions of cooler than average temperatures, which is great. However, the most significant color I see here is red. And I made another one looking at March global anomalies, but this time, instead of going from 2000 to 2010, this time it's 2010 to 2021. If I toggle back and forth between these two maps, you can see very, very clearly that the warming is more intense in the past decade than it was in the decade previous, which is extremely concerning. And what we have seen within climate change are some relative expectations. This is an infographic from your book. So if we have warmer temperatures, then ice is going to melt, which we observe this here, right? This is looking at the cumulative loss of glacier mass, or the mean of all glaciers. You see a very, very stark decrease in that. With melting ice, we would also expect to see sea levels increasing, which is exactly what we see here as well. And this is from satellite data. I do realize that these two graphs are looking at different time periods, but we can still very easily see the increase in sea levels. And by the way, that's not just because of glaciers melting, but it's also due to thermal expansion. If you're familiar with the laws of thermodynamics, warmer things generally are more expanded, whereas cooler things are more condensed and compressed. So not only can we observe sea level rise from melting glaciers, but also because of that thermal expansion idea. There's other evidence of climate change going on as well. Other evidence can include changes in weather. So precipitation is changing. This is looking at precipitation variation since 1990. looking at anomalies, right? So we've had 40 wetter than average years, but only 20 drier than normal years. And then the first half of the century was drier than the average for the century. And I'm not sure if this is probably the United States in general, not global. But we can also see a change in seasonal weather patterns. So the timing of spring and fall frosts within the United States. That one is more clear, yes. But looking at the blue line here is last spring frost, and the red line here is first fall frost. We can definitely see a major flip in those lines, yeah. But why would that matter? Well, if you're a farmer coming along and trying to plant your crops, if you get an early fall frost, then it can kill your crops. And if you get a late spring frost, that can also kill your crops, and depends on what crop you're looking at in particular. We're also observing changes in biological events. So species are shifting ranges. This bird here, for example, the breeding range of the blue-gray gnatcatcher has shifted about 300 kilometers north since 1970. And this is something that we have observed with various other species as well. Notably, not just birds, but also insects. So, we deal with mosquitoes every once in a while, yeah? Well, if you're a cooler than average, or if you're just a cooler climate, then that's not supportive of mosquito breeding and things like that. But if that location starts to warm, then the mosquitoes can indeed go into that region and bring diseases to peoples and or creatures that have not ever had to deal with those kinds of diseases before, so that can be very detrimental. Additionally, we have phenological shifts as well. So the changing climate can change the timing of seasonal events like blooming or migration. A Colorado study that began in 1974 and followed 121 species showed that the length of time that these flowers are in bloom has increased. So lots of things going on there. But some folks who are skeptical of these ideas have said, well, the climate has always been changing. Well, you're not incorrect on that. The climate has always been changing. We've been able to look at data through ice cores, tree ring cores, sea sediment cores, and things like that. It's what we call proxy data. And we've been able to interpolate temperature and CO2 concentrations for the past 800,000 years up until present. So what you can see here is a very clear picture of warm phases and cooler phases, yes? Also note that this is not temperature anomaly, this is just temperature. But what we're looking at here at the bottom is CO2 concentration. And you can see a very, very clear marriage between these two ideas, yes? So when you see an increase in CO2, you also see an increase in temperature. And we'll explain the details of that, of why that happens later on. But there's this whole group of people who have come together and have been releasing climate reports every, I think it's 5-ish years, 4 or 5 years. And this is called the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, the IPCC. Maybe you've heard of these people before. It's basically a leading international body for the assessment of climate change. It was established in 1988 by the United Nations Environmental Program and the World Meteorological Organization in order to provide the world with a clear scientific view on the current state of knowledge in climate change and its potential environmental and socioeconomic impacts. Thousands of scientists around the world contribute to the work of the IPCC on a voluntary basis. This is the place to go for climate change information. And I encourage you to check out their most recent report. And you can do so at this website here. I would encourage checking it out. So here's the main page that you would go to, and you can go to reports, and you can go to the 5th assessment report, which was the most recent one. They are currently working on the 6th assessment report. What I like about this is you can click on the report and you can read the whole thing yourself if you would like. Basically, I mean, they say a lot of things, yes, but you can look at the various graphics that they have within the report. So if you're a very visual-oriented person, this would be the place to go. But I would definitely encourage at least skimming through some of the details that they have in the whole report. So I encourage you to check this out and have a look. But I'm going to highlight a couple of things that they have said in previous reports. First thing, this is from the 4th assessment in 2007. The warming of the climate is unequivocal. Greenhouse gases have increased as a result of human activities since the 1750s. Most of the observed increase in average temperatures is very likely due to the increase in anthropogenic greenhouse gases concentrations. What's this term very likely? Well, they have they've broken down the probability of terms, basically. So virtually certain would be 99% probability of occurrence, extremely likely is 95%, very likely is 90, and likely is 66. So just, a gentle reminder that science does not prove things. Methods can change and results somehow can change and things like that. But there's a very, very, very solid consensus that it's because that the warming is because of human activities. And unfortunately, we've been intentionally misled. Big corporations and big companies like Exxon, Shell, those big oil companies have known about climate change for a very long time, but they have chosen to not take it into consideration, basically. The most recent report from the IPCC is that many of the observed changes are unprecedented over decades to millennia. The atmosphere and ocean have warmed, and the amount of snow and ice have diminished, and sea level has risen. These are just basic facts. And they have increased since the pre-industrial era and are now higher than ever. This has led to atmospheric concentrations of CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide that are unprecedented in at least the last 800,000 years. Their effects, together with those of other anthropogenic drivers, are extremely likely to have been the dominant cause of observed warming since the mid-20th century. So, yes, the climate is freaking warming, and anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions are the cause. Is there anything that we here in the United States can finally get on with it and do something about it? We shall see. The future is a bit uncertain with that, but hopefully we can buckle down and get some things done. So when we come back in the next video you're going to watch is going to help break down the idea of why this is all happening and the basic mechanics behind it.